You know about the 4 Americans who lost their lives 21 months ago during the terror assault on the U.S. diplomatic compound in Benghazi, Libya. But what you don't know is the story of the U.S. Air Force crew who flew in to take the victims and the survivors out. The commander of that mission, now retired Air Force Reserve Major Eric Stahl. The day before 9/11/2012, the day of the Benghazi attacks, he and his crew, his C-17 crew, were on what was called Bravo Alert status in Germany, ready for a mission to transfer a detainee out of Guantanamo Bay. The C-17 transport plane was on standby as the situation in Libya exploded.
At the time, we were on a 45-day deployment to Ramstein Air Base, and we were there basically to pick up high-priority missions, last-minute missions that needed to be accomplished.
I mean, you were on this alert status for transfer from Gitmo, but we're talking 9/11 here.
Yeah. You would have thought that we would have had a little bit more of an alert posture.
Bottom line, I mean, you in the alert status you were in, conceivably, if they had called early enough, you could have evac'd those people from Benghazi.
Absolutely. We could have, if they would have called, we could have been down there 3 hours basically. A hurried up timeline, it probably would take us an hour and a half to get off the ground and 3 hours and 15 minutes to get down there. So we could have gone down there and gotten them easily.
That's not been talked about.
I think the only thing that I've heard is that there was no assets available. If they would have called early enough, certainly we could have gone to Benghazi. It's just a matter of when they made the actual decision.
Did you get the call to go to Tripoli?
We got the call. We didn't really know where we were going at the time. We were just told to get in as quick as we could, and we just guessed that we were going to Tripoli, obviously, because that was the big thing on the news at the time. And it wasn't until we got into our operations to find out that we were actually going to Tripoli.
Now, this is really the day after, right? We're now on 9/12.
Yes, this is the day after September 11th. Yeah.
So you fly into Tripoli, and it's, what, chaotic? What is it?
Actually, we didn't have a lot of information going in there. We had tried to call ahead. It wasn't until the flight going down that we knew whether or not Chris Stevens had made it or not. There was a lot of confusion.
You land on the ground, and what happens?
About 45 minutes after we arrived is when the folks from Tripoli, Benghazi, and the folks from the hospital arrived.
These are the pictures that you sent, and you see the vehicles around the plane.
Right, before we had actually placed the vehicles behind the train, that's when we had taken a few pictures.
Did you have any interactions on the ground?
The Prime Minister of Libya, he walked right up to me and grabbed my hands and had nothing but great things to say about Chris Stevens, apologized, and he said how the Libyan people absolutely admired and loved Chris Stevens, and that they would get to the bottom of who was behind this.
The load on?
The first thing we did was a truck backed up, and they had the 4 bodies on, and they were basically on a stretcher with a sheet over them, and we put them in transfer cases basically, which is a way for us to get them from place to place, placed a flag over them. Because we didn't really know what the security situation was at the time, we didn't do a ceremony there.
Who else is on the plane?
We had 2 ambulatory folks that were wounded. We had 33 that walked on that were from the embassy and the Benghazi staff.
And then the 4
and then the 4 bodies, yes.
You land at Ramstein, and you have that ceremony.
Yes. The CIA folks were absolutely adamant about making sure that we had a ceremony. The entire embassy staff came out there, and there wasn't a dry eye in the back of the plane. I mean, it was kind of surreal going in, and it kind of hit us on the way back to Ramstein, what had just occurred and how big it actually was.
You've done the ceremony. Are these guys being interviewed?
They were taken away from the airplane. The U.S. ambassador to Germany met us when we landed, and they took them away because he wanted to debrief them that night.
So they do a debrief with the U.S. ambassador in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and they told you they also talked to the FBI and
Mm-hmm.
Homeland Security. That's in the first.
Yeah, I saw them the next morning and knew that stuff was going on.
So now we're talking 9/13.
Yes.
You spent time with them there because they're still there. You're there,
Mm-hmm.
and talked with them.
Yes.
What did they tell you?
I think the biggest thing that hit me, even the next morning after we all got up from what had happened, was I remember looking at a couple of them and asking them, "What's up with the videotape thing? Everybody keeps talking about that this has to do with the videotape," and they just shrugged and said, "I have no idea."
They were puzzled by the video.
It's one of the things that I said to a couple of the guys. I said, "What? Do you guys understand what's going on in the press, what they're saying?" And one guy just looked at me and goes, "I have no idea." Like they were completely perplexed. Like they knew that this was a full-scale attack from while it was going on. And the reports about the video, or they had some kind of a spontaneous uprising, was confusing them because they had mortars, AK-47s, and RPGs.
Because they knew right away.
They knew during the attack that it was who was doing the attacking.
And they told you that?
Yes.
What specifically? How did they know?
After they had left the consulate in Benghazi and went to the safe house, they were getting reports that cell phones, consulate cell phones, were being used to make calls to the attackers' higher-ups, I guess, what you can say.
So they're getting real-time
Yes.
info that these cell phones that were State Department
Right.
cell phones are being used by the bad guys to talk to their leadership.
They didn't give any specifics. They just said that they knew while the attack was going on who was doing it.
A separate source with intimate details of the situation confirmed this to Fox, that the source saw intelligence reports of real-time intercepted calls of terrorists using State Department cell phones recovered at the consulate during the battle to call their leadership, and that the info was relayed to teams on the ground.
They said that there was a Libyan security guard that was on the take for the bad guys and had given them given the bad guys information about escape routes, who was at the consulate, where the location of the CIA safe house was, stuff like that.
And they knew that.
And they knew that.
So you're interacting with these guys, and they're telling the story about how they get out
Yeah.
of Benghazi.
I guess once they left the CIA compound, they headed to the airport. This whole battle had lasted 7 to 8 hours, pretty protracted battle. They're all pretty shot up. Obviously, they had wounded with them. And once they got to the airport, they had a private plane waiting for them that they were going to all get on to evacuate, along with 2 of their guys that were pretty injured.
So they've got those guys on stretchers.
They've got those guys on stretchers, and from what they told me, they had to strap them onto the stretchers because the doorway was too narrow.
In the private plane.
In the private plane, so they actually had to strap them onto the stretchers and turn them sideways to get in. And they were pretty banged up. I guess one had a femoral leg wound, which the tourniquet came off, got pretty bloody.
And there's a flight attendant?
Yeah, I guess when they took their 2 injured guys on the airplane, she started getting kind of hysterical when, it got bloody. And she wanted them to, put their guns away, which they were a little hesitant to do.
So the story that you hear at Ramstein is that this blood is all over this private plane. The flight attendant is really kind of losing it.
Yeah.
And telling them to put the guns like in the back bathroom or something?
I think it was in the bathroom, yes.
And then a round goes off?
I think they were trying to clear their weapons, or at some point a round went off because they were obviously in a rush. They didn't know when or if they were going to get jumped at the airplane or at the airport. And so I think just in the trying to get out of there. At one point, a round went off, and then the pilot came running back and was trying to find out who was shooting in his airplane.
Wow.
And I think at one point they just looked at him and said, "Let's get out of here now."
That's a pretty amazing story.
Pretty scary.
And again, had your C-17 been tapped sometime during that 7-hour, 8-hour period,
if we would have gotten the call, you know, right when this all kicked off, if they would have made a decision, because one of the other things they told me was that they had requested that a C-130 be on standby at the airport a month prior.
A month prior to 9/11.
A month prior to 9/11, and the request, I guess, was denied. So they had requested something to be on standby there in Benghazi.
In case it got hairy.
Mm-hmm.
Why tell this, you know, now?
I don't think a lot of the truth has necessarily been told. I think people aren't necessarily fessing up to what happened, and hopefully the truth will come out eventually. You know, I told these guys, you guys are absolute heroes. These guys clearly deserve some kind of recognition. They're absolute heroes for what they did.
Eric Stahl was not interviewed for the ARB, the Accountability Review Board. We reached out to the former ambassador to Germany, U.S. Ambassador to Germany, Philip Murphy, for comment, have not heard back. This story is also posted online, foxnews.com, at the top of the webpage there, and we will also be posting this interview on our homepage. The stunning primary upset of House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. We'll talk about that, what it all means, when the panel joins me after the break.